Good afternoon and welcome to America's Home Cooking. I use a lot of different yeast and I don't think a lot of you know the difference from all the yeast, so we're going to talk about yeast. Yeast, well, what's the difference? There's a big difference. This is wild yeast right here, all right? This one's done and made up with corn flour, which is the original grain of flours. Now it only had this one only has 2 chains of carbohydrates, which means the body can handle this. And this is the one. But when they started crossbreeding them, we ended up with chains of 8, which is now starting to give people problems with their digestion. Now, this is sponge culture. I call this my sponge culture because I use bread flour and water, and I caught the microbes. Now there are this one, by the way, has all the microbes as well. There's I think it's 450 microbes, and they're in the air all around us. But you have to have a water and flour ratio, preferably what they call winter wheat, which is the hard wheat, which is known as bread flour. And if you set it up by a window in the spring, you capture those little things and you end up with sponge culture. Now, this is very good. These cultures that we're talking about are great for your body. You need them for the intestinal walls and everything to help break down the food, get the nutrients in and everything else. So these wild cultures are really great. Now from this, if you change the water ratio just a bit, you end up with liquid culture, okay? Now we're going to go, because there are different yeast and it's very hard to know what yeast is what. Now, they took this, and a man noticed that women took a while for their bread to rise. Like, I have to start it in the morning before I can make it the next day. There's 2 long rises. And he decided to figure out which one of these microbes grows fast. Well, he found it, got rid of all the other microbes, and got this one little one to multiply. Hence, we have this. But to make bread making easier than just having to make 2 rises within half the day, they decided they'd modify it and make it speed up. Hence, this. But remember, every time they change, when they took it out and made this, they did not add the other microbes to it. So you only get 1 microbe multiplied, and then here it's modified to even breed faster to lift your bread up. But if you want all those microbes, you have to make your own yeast, which is the sponge culture and then the liquid. Now, if you're having trouble with carbohydrates, because you would have to go to corn flour, corn wild yeast, and then be able to probably eat bread, and it won't upset you if you have a carbohydrate problem, breaking it down in your body. If you're having trouble breaking it down, you can bet your digestive system is not up and running. But those microbes help break down the food, and when you eat it, it just helps you all the way down through. You got 26 feet? It's got a lot of work to do to cover. Now, there is another yeast that is not even related to that. This one is called brewer's yeast, and it is a byproduct of beer making. It is loaded with vitamins and minerals and everything else in between. This is what it's called, brewer's yeast. You find this at the health food store. I would recommend you buying it from Puritan Pride, but they took it off and they're no longer selling it. So now I'm using now. But this, if you don't like wheat bread, you can add, when you make a loaf of bread or biscuits or something, you can add 1 tablespoon in. It will not affect the flavor, and you'll be getting traces of minerals. Now see, in Europe, especially in France, they have these beautiful hills and valleys and stuff. When they grow their wheat in a certain area, because of the minerals and vitamins and stuff that are in the ground, their breads have a unique taste. Then you go to another section of France, and they're growing their wheat for that area, and then when they make the bread, because the bread would be, the grains would be bought with the area right where they grow it, and then the bakery would make it, it too has a uniqueness. So wherever the flour or the wheat is grown is going to dictate the different taste that you get in your breads. America does it one way, so all our flours are basically the same, but at one time they used to be very, very different. Anyway, this is a yeast that I use. I call this a food yeast because I can add it to my pancakes, I can add it to my biscuits, my muffins, my breads, cornbread, whatever I want in the bread category, or what you call starch, I can add it to it and there's no problem to it. So these are the different kinds of yeast and how they've progressed and moved forward and everything else. So you have to be careful. Now when you go to the store and you're not going to a bakery where they make the bread right there, you'll think you're buying sourdough bread and you're not in the store. What they do is they add vinegar to it to give it a twang. And that's why you think, oh, I'm eating sourdough bread, and you're not. You would have to go to a bakery that makes it. And if you go to buy a loaf, you'll be lucky if it's this big. And you have to pay for it because of the work that goes involved to making a real sourdough bread. So it's very important that you do. But understand that yeast has changed through the times. But the best one is this one, which is the original grain, before they started crossbreeding them. Once they started crossbreeding them through time, I have to say it takes a couple generations, you start finding problems. And people don't realize this. And I get a lot of people say, I just like white flour. I mean, I like white rice. I don't like whole wheat or anything. But if you make your bread and you want to make sure your family gets some B vitamins, you can go to a health food store, buy this, and then sit there and just add a tablespoon in for each loaf that you make, and it won't affect the flavor. You'd have to add a lot more before it affect the flavor. All right, so that's some about yeast and which yeast are which, because there is a history to the yeast. All right, so listen, you take care and have a great, it's almost evening, but I'm still going to say have a great day. Okay, bye-bye.